we're going to mount Schmidt Bender PM2 in a spur mount using a Badger Ordnance dead level. And this isn't the best method for everything. It works for this rifle setup because we are assuming that on the Accuracy International AX and other rifles like this, the Barrett MRAD, the Fix Q, this rail, the center of this rail, and the plane the rail makes is perpendicular to the center of the bore. And the way these rifles are manufactured, that's almost guaranteed. So mount the scope on top of the rifle as an assembly. We're going to mount the scope on a Badger dead level. So this isn't necessarily the best method or correct method, but it's what I do and it works for me. So spur mount has a recoil lug in it, just like most mounts, and this wants to be forward. The forward edge of this towards the objective of the scope when you mount it, the forward edge needs to be in full contact with the vertical breech side of the Picatinny rail. And this is what keeps this from sliding when shooting. So you take this recoil lug, put it in your slot, and push it forward. You can see how it slides slightly, that's so it doesn't bind up and be over constrained. So you want to push it forward. But first, we got to tighten these down slightly before we fully torque them. You can see imprinted on here is the sequence that you torque them in. You've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you want to turn this one a little bit, this one a little bit, this one a little bit, and this one a little bit, repeatedly until you hit 45 inch-pounds of torque, which only applies to this specific mount. Every mount will come with a torque spec, and it doesn't translate between different mounts, so go with what the manufacturer says. I'm going to put this on, slide it forward, start at number 1, just tighten it up a little bit. Start with number 2, till it's about finger tight. Sorry, number 1. Go to number 2, till it's about finger tight. Number 3, until it's about finger tight. And then 4. And if it slides, wonderful, but I tightened it a little too much, it doesn't slide, so I'm going to back off each screw just ever so slightly so that it's tight, but it slides. And you can hear and possibly see that sliding, so I'm going to push it all the way forward. Start with 1, just go finger tight plus maybe a 1/16 of a turn, finger tight 1/16 of a turn, finger tight 1/16 of a turn, finger tight 1/16 of a turn. I'm going to look at it and make sure nothing is, that there's no dirt or anything under one of the washers, which is going to affect the torque value and the actual tension on this screw. That's what we're trying to have consistent, so when we put it on the rifle, it will behave just like it is on this dead level. And pick it up for this, then we'll level it after. So just continue to go slight turns on each one in the correct torque sequence until you hit 45 inch-pounds. And using fix-it sticks is a torque limiter, so you can't go over 45. And you'll hear it kind of click and slide when it hits 45. And it's getting close. if you have Badger Ordnance, Night Force, something along those lines, they go to 55 or 65, which is quite a bit to do with a wrench like this. So you can easily take that, get a longer lever arm, which will then make it easier for you to turn. You heard that click. So I hit 45 inch-pounds on number 2. 1 is probably close, but slightly less. So I heard it click there. I'm going to move on to 3, 4, back to 1. Now, the only one that's clicked is 2. 1 just clicked. I'm going to again click 2. So now 3 didn't click. 4 clicked. I'm going to do them again. Now, again, if you have a regular torque wrench, be careful not to actually turn this. I probably wouldn't even tighten these after they clicked with a regular torque wrench. Now, I hope 3 does. There, it just clicked. 4. I'm going to give them one more just to make sure it's consistent, and you'll see later that's extremely important, especially when you have 6 screws up here. So once everything's torqued, check it again. Okay. Now that's mounted, we're going to move on to putting the scope in and the rings on. But first we need to level this, and we want to verify that when this is level, the level in the back of the spur mount is also level or very close to level. So before this, you need to mount this up loosely and mount the assembly on the rifle. Put the rifle in the different positions you're going to be shooting. You want to get the eye relief correct. You do that on the highest power, and check all the positions you're going to be shooting in. I've had this rifle for 4 or 5 years. I have marks on it exactly where the different scope mounts go, so I know where to put this and where to mount this. But if you buy a new rifle and scope, assemble it, play with it for a few days. Unless you have a rail where you can move it up or back a rail or two. A slot or two. So I'm going to take this scope. I'm remounting it just because it came back from Schmidt Bender after being repaired. So I don't know what sort of oils are on here or anything like that. While we do the next step of leveling this, verifying that the spur level, the indicator in the spur level, it's a spirit level, is horizontal, we want to take the screws off if you haven't already, put them in a little cup, and we're going to want to soak them in acetone. And we're also going to be dipping our rags into this acetone. So a shot glass will work, but it's easier if you have a slightly bigger glass. You just want to submerge them, and it's extremely important that we have the screws and threaded holes clean. So I'm going to just let those sit. Acetone evaporates very quickly, so cover it, because we're going to be dipping our rag into it here and there. So once we level this, we don't want to be touching it too much. So right now, I'm going to clean the inside of the ring with acetone to make sure there is no grease in it and it's clean. You can see that you can see how quickly it evaporates. It's wet and then it's gone. This mount has been used for most of this rifle's life, so it's well used, and you can see grit in there. Okay. Looks clean. And we're going to level it. So the Badger level has a very shallow concave bubble level in it that you need to view exactly from the top. If you're off slightly, it will not be level. So you want to view directly above it, turn the two adjusters until the level lines up inside of the black dot. The black dot is slightly smaller in diameter, so you'll be able to see the level over the top. And as you turn one knob, or adjustment knob, it generally affects the entire thing, so it'll move in two axes, not just the one you're adjusting. So it's a bit like an Etch-a-Sketch. You're going to be turning both knobs at once. That looks to be dead level. So now this is level. We want to verify that the spur level is also level, because that's what we're going to be using when we're shooting with our off eye. It's kind of on the left side, so I don't know if it works for left-hand shooters, but right-hand shooters, you open your left eye, you're going to be able to see this level when you're behind the rifle. And it's dead on. Flashlight helps view these levels. It also is going to help in the next step when we're putting the caps on. The next step is we need to clean these threaded holes that the screws will thread into. After that, we will clean the screws. So people will say not to use Q-tips, and I use Q-tips. You just want to make sure they don't leave anything behind. And generally you pull the cotton out slightly. You want to get it, I think these are number 6 screws, they might be number 4, so they're fairly small in diameter. You want to get it small. We're going to dip it in the acetone and insert it into the screw threads. And insert it into the threaded hole, turn it along with the screw, and you're going to feel it tighten up and just kind of work its way through there. And pull it out. This one's pretty clean. This one's clean. So I'm going to get a new Q-tip and move on to the next. Okay, so now we need to clean the screws. The way I do this is they've been soaking in acetone. Put it on the driver and just good old paper towel. Higher quality ones stay together better. And I've used this mount many times, so these screws are clean. But I will put a picture up that shows dirty screws. Still going to clean each one of these, and you don't want to see any discoloration on the paper towel. I will then put them on paper towel next to the acetone to dry. The threads need to be clean so the thread locker adheres to them. If you have oil or grease, that can inhibit the performance of the thread locker. So the screws are clean, the threaded holes are clean. We already wiped the inside of the ring half that's attached to the base. We want to use a little bit of acetone, make sure the top half of the ring is clean, and we also want to make sure that the seats for the screws are clean as well. I'm again gonna use a little bit of acetone just to make sure there's nothing in there, and the screw has full contact with the ring half. Now, if your rings are far apart, like if you're using separate rings on a hunting rifle or something along those lines, you want them as far apart as reasonable. Your scope will have a lot of room to move front and back. So unlike this, where I'm just centering it up on a very small section of scope tube, a lot of times you might want to put a little piece of tape or something to mark where it is when you mocked it up on the rifle to make sure it was positioned properly. So I am just going to put it where I want in the rings, kind of make sure it's seated correctly. And you can kind of wiggle it back and forth. You want to make sure it doesn't rock. If so, check the mounting of the rings. You might need to lap them or buy better quality rings, but this is dead solid. I'm going to put the ring top on the ring bases and just finger tight the two middle screws. If this was a scope where the rings only had 4 screws, I would do, for example, the top breech side on one side and then the muzzle side on the other screw, so they're diagonal. And on the next ring I would do the opposite. I would do the breech and then I would do the muzzle. Since these have 6 screws, I'm doing the middle ones. Again, this is probably not the correct process, but it works for me. I say it works for me, I've been doing this for 10 years and never had any issues. Of course, I'm also using quality components. Okay, so when you get them finger tight, the next thing to do is we want to adjust them to finger tight, but have the gap on each side of the rings be equal. And this is going to be very important because as we torque these down, you do not want the top half of the ring to make contact with the bottom half of the ring. These are designed to be floating, and the only thing connecting the top half to the bottom half is a screw. So if you set these up and they're offset, once we get it torqued down, you might be okay, but there's also a very good chance you could be making contact or very close to contact. If you're really close to making contact but are not, like say you can fit paper in there, when you fire your rifle and this scope starts rocking, swinging, vibrating, it's going to deform elastically these screws, and this gap is going to be changing as the scope vibrates. Keeping them equal, they're designed so that that gap is large enough when torqued to the specifications the manufacturer gives. And this is where a flashlight comes in handy. Very good to be able to see the gap between them. You could use feeler shims here, but that's probably overboard. So right now it looks like the back has about 0.5 millimeter gap on each side. I'm going to do the same for the front. Let's see if you can see the back there. So I believe the gap is just about equal between the top and bottom rings. So I think this is ready to continue on to the next step, which is going to be loosening these the same turn per screw, usually about 1/16 of a turn, until the scope can spin left and right, front and back. Now you'll be able to feel one side might be tighter or looser than the other, one ring. And right now I can feel that these ones are turning fairly easily. It's taking more torque to turn these out. So I'm going to do an extra turn on these because this could already be loose enough. And this one might be keeping it from rotating. I got ahead of myself on this video, and usually when setting up the gap is going to be more precise. If you do one ring, you tighten it down so the gaps are equal, and then you loosen it up slightly so the scope will move. I didn't do that here. Check your gaps to make sure they're staying equal. If you're making a lot of adjustments and you think you're making a 1/16 of a turn, and you aren't, you're making a 1/20 of a turn several times over, that adds up. So that did it. This scope can now turn with fairly minimal force and be leveled, and I can also center it front and back while turning it if I needed to. But this one is still fairly centered. You don't want to ever have the taper from the tube to the objective be right on the edge of the scope. Same with the ocular. This has got the illumination housing, and the gap between those is about equal. So I'm going to align my badger level again. And that's pretty close. You shouldn't assume the top of the turret is perpendicular to the vertical turret adjustment and reticle. But I have yet to find a Schmidt Bender that is not. I've had this scope for about 5 years and I've checked it before it aligns. So I'm going to assume when I put this on here, this is going to be indicative of the vertical travel of elevation as well as the reticle. So my badger level is level. I'm going to put this on the turret. Check the badger level. Check the spirit level. Now we want to turn the spirit level 180 degrees. Make sure it reads the same. The other thing you can do is to verify that the turret travel, or one indicator that the turret travel will be correct, is if you spin it, 180 degrees and check how level it is again. That'll tell you if the turret itself is wobbling as you unscrew it. So these need to be torqued, and I will start with a 15-pound torque limiter, and I will get every screw just by little turns on each one, to 15 inch-pounds. From there, we'll move up to 20 inch-pounds and then 25 inch-pounds. And throughout the process, we need to be confirming that this scope stays level. Lots of scopes and rings do not stay level. That's generally an indication that the fit is not ideal. But you can still continue on and get around that, which I'll explain a little bit later if we encounter it or if we don't. I'm turning each screw the same amount on the same ring, just repeatedly trying to maintain the correct gap or equal gaps. Check the gaps. They look good. I would guess I'm nowhere near 15 inch-pounds yet. So be patient. Okay, we're getting up there. You just heard a click, and now I hope this next one clicks. Which it did. It means I maintain consistent tension between both sides of the ring. Again, I'm just going to check the gap. Certainly don't want these to be touching on either side. And we want to make sure it's about equal, which it appears to be. So, I'm going to guess that those tightened down is going to be holding this scope and it won't rotate. I'm going to tighten the front ring, but I want to use the same process because we do not want to induce any internal stress into the scope tube by twisting it between the rings. Eventually, through shooting it, when everything's vibrating, stretching, contracting, it will equalize. Gap looks to be about equal. Now the next step, we level the Badger again. We put our bubble level on the turret to make sure as this seated down, it's not fully torqued yet, and it will change slightly, but as this seated down, it didn't twist. And it did twist, slightly. This was dead centered before, and now the gap is about halfway towards the windage side of the scope, almost touching. So, probably 6 out of 10 times you do this, that happens. And it's okay. The next step will be to loosen these, level it, and then tighten them down again. Now, I'm going to guess with this scope, that will be enough. If you repeat that process and you get the same angle offset, I guess, when you tighten that down. If the scope rotates the same amount, all you're going to do is on the next time offset it by the amount it turns as you set it down. But generally, this scope and this scope base do not do that. So I'm sure the next go around will fix it. So I have these loose. It took about 3/4 of a turn to get it so the scope will rotate. Once again, because I think it was just seating in the rings, I'm going to level this and I'm going to put the scope level. I am not going to offset it unless it does it again. So I'm going to verify that each of these are 15 inch-pounds, which I already did when I was tightening them. But just make sure, because we have good alignment, we don't want to lose it. So now, because this is these rings have 6 screws each, I am going to put the other 4 in and use an X pattern of tightening them in the same manner, little by little, until all of them are 15 inch-pounds of torque. From there, we'll step up in torque to 20 pounds, then 25 pounds, simply just to maintain the gap between the two and make sure we aren't twisting the scope when we're tightening. I'm just running these down until I feel them contact the top of the ring. And I'm going to back off slightly. I don't want to be turning the ring yet, putting more tension on one side than the other. I feel it starting to tighten down. I'm going to back off slightly. This is where I wish I had like a 5 inch-pound torque set. Torque wrench set. Back off. Now, because I started up here on, I guess, the left or the top ocular or breech side, on this ring I am going to start on the right or bottom muzzle or objective side. Back off. So I'm going to again check my alignment. Okay. And excellent. Still in alignment. So now I am going to tighten the middle screws, which were originally torqued to 15 inch-pounds. These shouldn't move much, but I just want to verify they are still 15 inch-pounds, and if they aren't, it means I put too much tension and didn't back off one of these other screws enough. I just barely started to turn, so click, click, that's good. Barely started to turn, click, click, just like the front and back were about the same, so check alignment again. Perfect. Now we're going to tighten the screws on the outside of the rings, 8 screws total, 4 per cap. And again, X pattern, and we're going to reverse that on the other side. So I've been starting up here on this one, so I'm going to start down here. Just slight turns. Then a click, and a click, click, click. So this entire ring is torqued to 15 inch-pounds. I am going to re-level the Badger Ordnance dead level, put bubble level on, and I am still dead center. So I'm going to go do that for the top half, or muzzle side, objective side. Click, click, click. I believe that's exactly what happened on the rear ring as well. Check our levelness. Dead on. So now we'll bring it up to 20 inch-pounds. And then the final 25. Spuhr recommends 15 to 25. If the scope functions properly with more tension on the rings, I'm going to do that because it's going to keep it from moving during shooting. I've dropped this exact scope in this base off a rooftop stage. It was during practice, off a rooftop stage onto the ground, which was a good 6-8 foot fall onto gravel and possibly some grass, and picked the rifle up and it was still dead on. I'm not sure other setups would behave that way. I trust this scope immensely. I have several of these and none of them have failed me. I've worn parts out, and that's about it. And their service is great. I actually had an issue with a hunting scope. Rifle season always opens the second Saturday in October, and this was the first Sunday in October. I was going, just verifying my hand loads, my zero, getting velocities, everything, and I was doing that. So 1.5 to 6x42 Zenith, Schmidt Bender Zenith. Absolutely amazing scope. It's got a number 8 reticle in it, first focal plane, 1/10 of a mil adjustments. Great hunting scope. Anyway, I was checking zero and everything at 6 power. I usually hunt with all of my scopes on 2 power. So I get home, I'm getting everything set up for opening day of hunting season, and I go to set my scope to 2 power, where I'd left it on 6 from the range, and it didn't move. It was just stuck. And so Monday, I called Schmidt Bender service in Virginia. I want to say they're in Winchester, Virginia. And spoke to their service department, explained hunting season opened on Saturday, and if I'm taking my scope off to send it to them, I still need time to zero. So they said, we aren't making any promises, but if you get us your scope tomorrow via next day air, we will do everything to get it back to you by Thursday. So this was Monday, they were promising it back by Thursday. Monday, I sent it out next day air. They had it Tuesday. Tuesday, I got a shipping notification, and I had this scope, or not this scope, my hunting scope back in my hands by Wednesday. It was a burr on one of the lenses that was binding up, and they came through big, and I mean, that was, I thought I was going to be hunting on 6 power all year, but they pulled through. Just a great company. So let's go through, and 20 inch-pounds on everything. So we're going to start opposite side, just tiny turns, very consistent. And I'm starting on the center. Click, click, wonderful. Now I'm going to go X pattern, slight turns. I'm going to get a click here. Click. 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 Check the center screws and then the outside screws again. Just moved a bit. Click. Click. Let's try opposite direction again. Slight movement, no click. Click. click, 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 click. So these are tightening very consistently every time. We'll move on, we'll verify alignment again, make sure we haven't pushed anything out. Dead on, and we will move to the muzzle objective ring. Slight turns of the middle screws. Click, click. So now we're going to go X pattern, opposite of before. We'll verify the alignment again, then we'll move up to 25 inch-pounds. Excellent. On to 25. I started on the breech or ocular side of the scope before, so I will start on the other side on the bottom. We're going to do the center screws, just slight turns. Click, slight turn, click, slight turn. Just because that didn't match what we've been seeing before, I'm going to check the ring spacing. Everything looks good, so we'll move to the outside. Slight turn. Turn, click, click. And all those are 25 inch-pounds, which is our target. So check alignment, and then we'll be done, with the exception of Loctite. It shifted ever so slightly during that last one. And the tightening of these was not consistent. So something was moving during that last tightening sequence on this ring, but it is really close to center. Scope base is still centered. I mean, it just barely moves, so I'm gonna leave it. I don't think, if I did it, it would be hard to get it this close again. I mean, that's almost perfect, so. It's almost perfect. So, it's ever so slightly high on the parallax side of the scope. So, in theory, if I tighten these top rings more, it would turn it. So when we go to Loctite, I'm going to start both rings on the top side or parallax side of the ring. Let me check my gaps. Make sure they're still even. Especially because so the gaps are consistent, so I'm going to start on this side. So if anything changes when we are, because Loctite, we're going to Loctite this, will change the friction coefficient, but generally I haven't seen it affect the alignment of a scope. Once we get it to this point, I haven't seen it change enough to where it affects the cant of the scope. Okay. So for ring screws, I always use Loctite 222. Recently they started selling maximum strength, but this is for this diameter screw, and if you need to get it off, you won't need to use a torch. Just the regular tools will get it off. You always want to shake it first. And this one's brand new, so I got the tip off. Okay, so I'm going to start on the top side, parallax side, because we're slightly out of alignment. I mean, just ever so slightly. But it wasn't 100% perfect. It was 90% perfect. I'm going to pull that screw out. Add purple Loctite. Generous amount. And tighten this down until it clicks. Click. Now center again on the other side. Again. Click. Now I'm going to X the outsides. So this is the last screw. And I will go through and check the torque of all of them, check alignment, then we'll move on to the front ring. So slight movement, click, 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 again. If this is still good, we aren't going to be touching these again. So, all those click. About dead on. It's just about what it was before. In case anybody is wondering, this is a Tremor 2 reticle. It's what I run in all of my long range guns. an exceptional reticle if you know how to use it. The wind dots are amazing if you know how to use them and if you're going to hold over. I wouldn't want to shoot anything but the trimmer too. So now let's align this again. And make sure the turret top is still in line. That's really good. Another thing we can do is twist our elevation up a bit. We're still there. And it's, I mean, it's as close to perfect as most people are gonna get. I could do this probably 5 or 6 more times and not get it better than this. And like I said, I'm not gonna miss targets because of this scope to base can't. So now we put it on the rifle. Take it off the Badger level. So this process made 2 big assumptions, which are probably incorrect to make, but I haven't had an issue doing it with this setup. I am assuming that this bubble level and rail of the Badger Ordnance Dead level are the same and are perfect enough to match up to my Accuracy International. One thing I will do is check the ring gap just to make sure there's consistency, and I see a little bit of purple liquid in that gap. Just these are tightened down to 45 inch-pounds, and at that tension I don't feel the need to use Loctite. I haven't had an issue. I do put a little bit of wax on the screws, which may help with vibration. It may not. But I do not use Loctite on these. If you want to, go for it. I have, but my scopes on competition guns are on and off so often, I don't do it. Maybe it'll bite me in the ass someday. Okay. Now I'm on both sides. This mark right here is for the cantilevered version of this mount, which I use on this scope, which is generally used as a backup to this. It has had to go back for repairs 3 times in its lifetime, and this I usually have mounted up. I keep it zeroed for the rifle, and I can pop it on whenever I need. Same reticle, same turret, same scope effectively, but this one does not have illumination, which I have never used. I've shot night matches and never used illumination. You know, maybe some people like it. I wouldn't spend the money on it if I had the choice. The other difference is these scopes are different colors. This one is RAL 8000. And this one is Pantone. I'm pretty sure I have that right. Both of these sunshades, which I actually run for shooting in the rain, they keep water off your objective lens, are Pantone color. So you can see these two match. These two are slightly off, but it doesn't make any sense as to why they offer both. From my standpoint, they're interchangeable. So that's where my scope needs to be placed, and again I'm going to follow the torque sequence marked on here. I'm finger tightening these and slightly backing off just so the scope will slide, and I can replicate recoil and push it all the way forward. I'm going to maintain pressure on the scope while I just start to finger tighten these and get some tension on these screws. It's probably enough where I can let go of this. And I'm going to follow the torque sequence all the way to 45 inch-pounds. That's not good. I am going to grab a replacement screw for that. Okay, so here is the old screw that I sort of stripped out, and I'm replacing it with the same. You'll notice that these are not what the spur came with, and I changed them out because it's an M5x25 screw, so it has a 4mm hex on it. The Accuracy International, every screw on here, I can grab it, fits a 4mm hex. So to change the barrel, to do any of these Picatinny lengths, to remove this Arca mount, the hand guard, to adjust the buttstock, everything uses this. And your wrench gets more purchase on it. So you hopefully don't strip it like I just did. You could probably still use it, but I'll change it. I have the correct screws. So. We're swapping it out for the good one. And these are class 12.9, just straight socket head cap screws. Two, three, one, two, three, four. I'm gonna just check it by using the longer torque arm. Okay, so this is on the rifle, as far forward as it goes, torqued properly. The next step is I will bring it outside and hang a plumb bob, I don't know, 60, 80, 100 yards away, put my crosshairs on it, make sure that the bubble level in the spur mount is horizontal, and then I'll want to see that my reticle is parallel and on top of that plumb bob. Then I want to run my turret all the way up and make sure it follows that plumb bob string that's hanging, and then I'm going to run it all the way back down and make sure it's in the same spot. Using this method, for me, that's always been the case. It may not work for you, but this works for me, and enjoy.